This is for the ones who refuse to stay down. For those who heard the doubt, felt the weight of opposition, and still rose anyway. You weren't given a seat at the table. You built your own. You didn't wait for permission. You took your place. They called you reckless. They called you impossible. They swore you wouldn't last. And yet, here you are, standing taller than ever, while they watch from the shadows, speechless. This isn't just a story of resilience. It's proof that destiny bows to those who refuse to break. Every punch thrown your way, every whispered lie, every carefully laid trap meant to bring you down only fueled the fire within. They thought they were writing your ending, but all they did was set the stage for your rise. You didn't just survive, you turned their downfall into your legacy. So now, let the world watch. Let them study every move, every step, every unshaken moment. They will never understand how you kept standing, how you kept winning, how nothing they did could shake you. But you know, you were built for this. Chosen one, this is how you ended them. They meant it for evil, but God turned it for good. Genesis 50:20. They built their traps like architects of destruction, drawing lines, setting snares, whispering in the dark like their words could shape your future. But a seed buried in the dirt does not die. It grows. And while they plotted your downfall, they didn't realize they were watering the very soil that would cause you to rise. They thought their deception would break you. They thought their manipulation would bind you. They thought their schemes would corner you into a place so small, so insignificant, that no one would remember your name. But what they failed to understand is that you were never playing their game. You were building your own kingdom. They spoke curses, but blessing covered you. They tried to drag you down, but grace lifted you higher. They threw obstacles in your path, yet every single one became a step that took you further than they ever imagined. And now, they sit in confusion, watching the outcome they never expected. You didn't just survive, you expanded. They meant to erase you, but their own hands traced your name in bold ink. They thought they could drown your voice, but all they did was make people wonder, who is this one they fear so much? Because make no mistake, fear was at the root of it all. Their obsession, their attacks, their desperation to see you fall had nothing to do with your weakness and everything to do with their own. They never wanted you to rise because deep down, they knew if you did, they would never be able to ignore you again. And now they are trapped in their own web, tangled in the very lies they spun, exhausted by the weight of their own deception. Meanwhile, you are free, walking forward, untouched, unbothered, untouchable. They set the fire, believing it would consume you. But what they didn't know, gold is refined in the flames. And while they watch from the ashes, wondering where it all went wrong, you stand stronger than ever. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn. Isaiah 54:17. They set the stage for your downfall, convinced they were the master planners, the architects, the ones holding the blueprint to your demise. They spoke in secret, pulled their strings, moved their pieces like chess players who thought the game was theirs to control. But what they failed to see, what they could never see, was that the game was never in their hands to begin with. Because purpose cannot be rewritten. Destiny cannot be undone. And a chosen one cannot be stopped. They worked in the shadows, pouring every ounce of their strength into your destruction. But they did not realize one thing. Every move they made against you was simply another step toward their own undoing. The harder they pushed, the more they lost their footing. The deeper they dug, the quicker they buried themselves. Because the laws of the universe do not play favorites. They play fair. What they sent out has returned to them. What they set in motion has come full circle. And while they sit in the ruins of their own failed conquest, exhausted, drained, and grasping for the control they never truly had, you are still here, thriving, rising, evolving. They expected retaliation, expected you to strike back, to stoop to their level, to throw the same stones they cast at you. But the chosen do not waste their energy on battles beneath them. You did not have to fight them. You outlasted them. You did not have to expose them. They revealed themselves. You did not have to destroy them. They destroyed themselves. And that is the irony they never prepared for. The moment they thought they had you cornered, the moment they were certain they had won, that was the moment the tides turned. What they planned as your defeat became your breakthrough. What they designed to silence you only amplified your presence. They believed they were writing your ending, but all they did was mark the beginning of your legacy. And now, as they stand among the wreckage, trying to piece together what went wrong, the truth settles upon them like a weight too heavy to bear. It was never you who was in danger. It was always them. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be with you. Remember this truth. Our lives are anchored in His divine plan, beyond worldly concerns. As Scripture says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." Luke 6:38. Like a mighty oak, we stand firm in His strength. Now, you have the opportunity to step into that blessing. When you use the super thank you button and give $100, know that His abundance will return to you 100-fold. They expected to watch you fade, to see you reduced to another casualty of their calculated destruction. And yet, the dust settled, and you stood untouched, unmoved, unchanged. Except now, the weight of their failure crushed them instead. They had seen their methods succeed before. They had watched others buckle, retreat, disappear. But this time, their own game turned against them. They built their strategies on the belief that you were like the rest, but they failed to recognize that you were never part of their equation. The fire meant to consume you only purified your path, leaving you stronger than before, untouched by the embers of their efforts. And now, the unshakable truth stands before them. You were never meant to be erased. They mocked loudly, ridiculed freely, and dismissed you without hesitation, confident in your eventual collapse. But what they once treated as amusement has now turned into fixation. They no longer attempt to diminish you. They analyze you, desperate to decipher how you outlasted them, how you refused to bend, how you remained when they had done everything in their power to make you disappear. And in that moment of realization, they are left with nothing but the weight of their own miscalculation. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn. Isaiah 54:17. They gathered their armies, sharpened their blades, and built their walls high, believing that if they stood together, if they hit you hard enough, if they spoke against you long enough, they could rewrite what was already written. But destiny does not answer to fear. Purpose does not bend to the will of those who seek to destroy it. You are not here by accident. You are called, chosen, appointed for this very hour. A tree planted by the river does not beg for rain, and a lion does not ask permission to roar. The moment they waged war against you, they sealed their own fate. They thought they were silencing you, burying you, writing your ending. But all they did was prepare the soil for your rise. The harder they fought to erase you, the deeper your roots grew. The louder they screamed for your downfall, the more impossible you became to ignore. Now the ones who laughed, the ones who mocked, the ones who stood in the shadows plotting, where are they now? Weaker, exhausted, confused. Their greatest mistake was believing their strength was enough to stop what heaven itself had set in motion. Their swords turned on them, their battle plans collapsed, and the weight of their own intentions crushed them long before they ever reached you. They expected you to fight for your place, to prove yourself, to beg for the right to exist, but you never needed their permission. You never needed to convince anyone of who you are. The oil of favor is on you, the kind that cannot be stolen, cannot be manufactured, cannot be mimicked. They saw your presence as a threat because deep down they knew what you have cannot be bought, cannot be manipulated, and cannot be undone. They assumed your silence meant surrender. They mistook your patience for hesitation. But what they failed to understand was that the battle was never yours to fight. You stood still, and the storm passed. You remained unmoved, and their own traps ensnared them. You refused to shrink, and their own doubts devoured them. They did not fall because you pushed them. They fell because their own foundation was built on nothing but sand. You are here for a reason. If you feel the call, answer it. Click Join to unlock exclusive content, deep insights, and a powerful community. This isn't just a membership, it's an awakening. Step into your divine purpose. Join the chosen. The tables have turned, and not because you fought for control, but because control was never theirs to begin with. Their voices have faded, their power has crumbled, and all that remains is the truth they fought so hard to deny. You were never meant to be defeated, and now they are drowning, not in your doing, but in the very wreckage of their own making. They never truly warred against you. They battled against a current far stronger than themselves, and in the end, they succumbed to it. Victory was never about overpowering them. It was about enduring long enough to watch them fall apart under the weight of their own miscalculations. And they feel it now. The weight of loss, the sting of a war they were never equipped to win. They envisioned a spectacle, imagined you collapsing under the pressure, hoped to witness the aftermath of their destruction in your shattered expression. But instead, you kept moving, calm, unaffected, unreachable. They waited for desperation, for chaos, for proof that their attacks had landed, yet none came. And nothing unsettles them more than that. Because the greatest defeat is not in being outmatched, it's in realizing you were never a match at all. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. Isaiah 59:19. They thought the flood would drown you. They thought the winds would tear you apart. They thought the fire would reduce you to nothing but ashes. But what they failed to understand is that you were never the one in danger. It was always them. A house built on the sand cannot withstand the storm, but a fortress set upon the rock. It stands, it endures, it remains. They built chaos like a weapon, believing it would break you. They gathered their armies of deception, sent wave after wave of attack, convinced that if they just applied enough pressure, you would crumble. But pressure doesn't destroy diamonds, it forms them. And so they watched, waiting for cracks to form, waiting for you to stumble, waiting for the moment where their schemes would finally bring you to your knees. But it never came. While they fought against shadows, while they exhausted themselves spinning lies, while they worked night and day to create a downfall you never stepped into, you walked forward, untouched, unfazed, unstoppable. They couldn't understand it. How? How did you not break? How did you not even flinch? How did you move with such certainty, such grace, such divine assurance? The answer was simple. The storm was never yours to fight. They thought they were in control, thought they were orchestrating something powerful, thought they were the ones dictating the outcome. But the entire time, their own destruction was woven into their plans. Every false word, every deceptive action, every desperate attempt to pull you down was just another rope, tying them to their own downfall. And then came the moment they had never prepared for, the realization that you were never in the storm at all. You were watching from above. While they wrestled with their own schemes, you remained still. While they scrambled for power, you moved with peace. While they fought a battle they created, you never even picked up a sword. That's what shattered them. It wasn't your retaliation, it was your refusal to engage. They wanted a reaction. They wanted a fight. They wanted to see you struggle, so they could convince themselves they had some measure of control over you. But they never did. And now they stand in the ruins of their own making. The flood they sent out has washed over them. The winds they stirred up have knocked them off their feet. The fire they set, it's burning them instead, because the chosen ones do not fall. The chosen ones do not shrink. The chosen ones do not answer to the chaos. They stand, they endure, they rise. And while the enemy burns in the fire they created, the chosen walk through it untouched. Now they are the ones unraveling, caught in the trap of their own obsession. Every move they made was calculated, every step carefully designed to dismantle you. And yet, it was their own hands that set their downfall in motion. They anticipated a collapse, expected to see you lost, struggling, defeated. But instead, you adapted. With every obstacle, you ascended. With every roadblock, you shifted. They mistook resistance for defeat, never considering that every attempt to stop you was only refining your resilience. And the worst part? They were never the architects of your story. They were merely spectators to a narrative they could never rewrite. The very energy they funneled into your destruction only fortified your rise. And now they are left staring at the outcome they never saw coming. The walls they built to contain you have become the very foundation, elevating you beyond their reach. They thought they were constructing barriers. Instead, they were setting the stage for something greater than themselves. The world isn't watching them. It's watching you. Watching as you move through every test with precision, as you carve a path through opposition without a second glance, as you turn every setback into proof of your strength. And them? They are left bewildered, exhausted by their own effort, burdened by the weight of their failure. Because nothing worked. Every strategy failed. Every desperate attempt to hold you back only served as evidence of how unstoppable you truly are. And now, they stand at a distance, watching as you ascend beyond the limits they tried to impose, forced to accept a truth they once laughed at. You were never meant to be stopped. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Galatians 6:7. They dug a pit, believing you would fall into it. They built a snare, convinced you would walk straight into their trap. But what they failed to understand is that the pit was never meant for you. It was theirs all along. A farmer doesn't plant thorns and expect roses. A man doesn't throw stones into the sky and expect them not to come back down. What they sent out has returned to them. And now, while they stumble in the wreckage, confused and desperate to escape the very chaos they created, you are nowhere to be found. Walking away wasn't a surrender. It was a statement. No words needed. No explanations given. You didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't waste your breath on conversations. that were never meant to be won. You just left. And that was the moment everything unraveled. They had spent so much time trying to control you, so much energy crafting illusions to keep you bound. But when you walked away, you took your power with you. They never expected that. They assumed you would fight, that you would engage, that you would try to prove yourself. But the chosen do not waste time proving what is already known. The weight of your absence hit them harder than any battle ever could. Because for the first time, they had to sit with the reality they had tried so hard to avoid. You were never the problem. They were. And now? Now they are left choking on the smoke of a fire they set with their own hands. They thought they were orchestrating your downfall, but in truth, they were writing their own ending. You were never part of their destruction. You were simply the mirror reflecting it back at them. And the moment you stepped out of their story, their entire house of cards came crashing down. They tried to build their world around your name, tried to use your presence as the foundation for their control. But when you left, the foundation was gone. And what happens to a house with no foundation? It crumbles. You didn't have to push them. You didn't have to fight them. You didn't even have to watch. Because by the time they realized what had happened, you were already too far ahead to hear the sound of their collapse. And now, they remain trapped in the spiral they designed while you move forward without a single glance back. Not out of revenge, not to prove a point, but simply because you never belonged in their chaos to begin with. They thought they could drag you into the cycle, keep you locked in an endless exchange of conflict and retaliation. But the moment you decided you were done, the game fell apart. They waited for your reaction, anticipated your return, braced for another round of their familiar routine. But all they got was silence, and in that silence, they lost. While they remain tangled in their own storm, you rise, elevated not by rage, but by clarity. Their distractions hold no weight where you're headed. Their desperation does not reach where you stand. They tried to pull you into the depths, but they never realized you were never in the waters with them. And now, as they watch from below, exhausted from a war that only ever existed in their own minds, the truth becomes undeniable. They spent everything trying to bring you down, and you never even paused to acknowledge it. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge. He is my shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. Psalm 18:2. They thought they could shake what was built on solid ground. They thought they could tear down what was never in their hands to destroy. But a fortress does not flinch at the sound of the wind, and a mountain does not tremble when the storm rages. They came at you with fire, convinced they could consume you. They laid traps, expecting you to walk right in. They whispered, plotted, and played their games, thinking that if they worked hard enough, if they schemed long enough, if they threw enough stones, they could bring you down. But how can a wave drown the ocean? How can a shadow touch the sun? They mistook their own noise for power. They believed that if they just kept pushing, you would fold, that if they kept throwing attacks, something would finally land. But all they did was exhaust themselves fighting a battle they were never meant to win. Because while they fought, you stood still. While they tried to pull you into chaos, you moved in peace. While they scrambled for control, you never even reached for it, because control was never theirs to hold. And now, the battlefield is empty. The voices that once spoke against you have gone quiet. The hands that tried to strike you down are shaking, not from power, but from the realization that they lost before they ever began. They fought against something they never understood. They believed if they could destroy your name, They could erase your destiny, but they forgot one thing. Favor is not given by man, and it cannot be stolen by man. You were never fighting them. You were simply walking forward, while they burned themselves out, chasing shadows. And now, as the dust settles, all that remains is truth. You are still standing. You are still thriving. You are still untouched. They waged war, and in the end, the only thing they conquered was themselves. Now, they are left with nothing but the knowledge that their battle was pointless, their fight was futile, and their attempts to weaken you only revealed their own fragility. That is the truth that will never stop haunting them. It isn't the defeat that stings. It's the realization that you never even considered them an opponent. They expected you to stumble, to harden with bitterness, to carry the weight of their actions like chains around your ankles. But instead, you remained light, unaffected, untethered by the wreckage they tried to create. And that is what they will never understand. They dedicated themselves to breaking you, but they never questioned why nothing seemed to touch you, why you continued to move with clarity, why your presence remained radiant, why no amount of effort on their part was enough to shake your foundation. They thought they could pull you into their chaos, force you into a space of destruction, drag you into the disorder they thrive in. But they never realized you were never standing in the same arena. You never played their game. And while they searched for ways to bring you down, you were already building something far greater, something they were never meant to be part of. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. They took one look at you and decided you weren't a threat. They believed if they ignored you long enough, if they dismissed you, if they whispered just enough lies, they could control how your story was told. But they made one crucial mistake. They forgot that purpose doesn't ask for permission. They assumed your stillness was surrender, mistook your humility for insignificance. They thought you were waiting for a seat at their table, never realizing you were building something greater than their entire foundation. Because you were never meant to fit into their world, you were meant to change it. And now, when you walk into a room, they feel it. A presence they can't define, a weight they can't explain. Something about you unsettles them, though they won't say it out loud. They don't know why, but their spirit knows. You don't belong to their system, their hierarchy, their way of doing things. They clawed for status, manipulated for power, fought for recognition. And yet, there you stand, undisturbed, untouched, unshaken, without ever having to play their game. Because what they had to chase flows through you naturally. They tried to shake your foundation, believing that enough pressure, enough slander, enough deceit would cause you to break. But a tree with deep roots does not fear the storm. So they watched, waiting for signs of struggle, for a moment of weakness, for proof that they had some control. But the proof never came. Because it was never a battle, it was an illusion. They weren't pulling the strings. They weren't orchestrating your downfall. They were just bystanders, wasting their energy, fighting something that was never within their grasp. And now, all they have left is the weight of their own miscalculation. They rejected you only to realize you were the cornerstone. They tried to erase you only to find your presence everywhere. They spent their time plotting against you, only to wake up one day and realize you had already won. They clung to the belief that they had control, never realizing that they had been fighting against themselves the entire time. The walls they built to trap you became the barriers that caged them in. The chaos they stirred only swallowed them whole. They lost, Not because you defeated them, but because they were never strong enough to take you down in the first place. And now, as they look around at the wreckage of their own making, there's only one truth they can't escape. They invested everything in your downfall, only to self-destruct in the process. You never had to retaliate. You never needed to explain yourself. While they spiraled, you remained steady. While they shouted for attention, you moved in silence. While they played their games, you continued forward, undisturbed by the noise. They wanted to see you struggle, expected to watch you crumble, hoped to witness your ruin. But instead, you smiled. Not in arrogance, not in defiance, but in peace. And that is the one thing they will never recover from.